preoccupied with the substance, meaning their brain is occupied on thinking about where and when am I going to use next and how am I going to use. The family does the same thing. They wonder when their loved one's going to use again and what it's going to look like, or when is this streak of sobriety going to end, or when is this bender going to end. The symptoms go on. There's 8 more symptoms to disorder, but the families have their own version of them that they take on. So what happens is this family system, as we reference it clinically, becomes addicted together. And you can't help your loved one with a substance use disorder until the family gets well. So when I'm contacted regularly by families, I can almost assess them to see where they're at, how deep are they into this. And if they're real deep, it's near impossible for me to do my job because they are argumentative and defensive, just like if we're going to approach your loved one with alcoholism, argumentative and defensive. The family is the exact same way. They want answers, but they're nervous about the solution. So they're very contemplative. So thank you for reminding me what an amazing point that is, that we just don't realize the families are, in a way, equally as ill, but the outcome of their illness is not as catastrophic as the alcoholics.
And oftentimes when we talk to families, it's such a complex thing because you may have a mother, you have a father, you have siblings, and each of them react to addiction very differently. So for those that are very kind of stuck in to this, argumentative, you mentioned, like it's really hard. What's the breakthrough? What's the point where a person says, okay, I got to change the way I'm handling things?
Are you asking about the person with the addiction or the family?
Oh, the family member.
The family member, yeah. As you mentioned, we're all unique people, right? We all respond to life and fear differently. Some of us shut down. Some of us attack. Some of us cope through our own ways. And so when we're looking at a person you love or care about dependent on a substance, we have a fear-based response. And so every family has their own response. There's usually always one family member that's the doer. That's the, let's tackle this. Let's take care of it. What's the plan? What are we doing? When are we doing it? I need a checklist. And kind of like, and that's it's not always that, it's clearly not that simple, right? This is a process. And so I think what you're asking me was about the person that's kind of overly, attempting to get their loved one to change when they're not willing to change.
How does that, if you're working to try to change that pattern, in your experience working with all these families, what does it take to change that mindset, or is there a way of being able?
I mean, there is, and the first thing is to take the focus off of your loved one who's using, and the sooner you can do that and realize that your best method towards helping your loved one actually doesn't entail you hyper-focused on changing them. It actually entails you stepping back and getting A, peer support here, B, talking to a professional that's a third party that's going to look at it objectively, a person like myself, utilizing friends and loved ones for support, and a place for you where you feel safe to process and share some of your concerns. Those are just 3. There's many more. I know we're limited on time. I'm not going to go through 25 things you can do, but those are 3 very simple ways to take the attention off of the person using and onto yourself. Because you're not going to actually gain traction, even though you're feeling like you are, but you're actually not.
And we get a lot of families, too, that express this guilt that ties into shame, and part of why we don't talk about it with other people, and we're hiding in there. What message do you have for a person that may be quiet and saying, I'm not ready to admit that this is what's going on, or I'm afraid of what people might say?
A family would? So not, again, sorry to clarify.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Not the person with the
and this could be, a mother, a sibling, even a child.
This brings me back to your first question. Families take on the same symptoms of the people using. Denial, minimization, rationalizing, right? So alcoholics deny they're alcoholic. They deny the severity. They minimize the risk they're taking. They justify their use. Families do the same thing. And so usually the first intervention is on the family or a few family members. So there's usually 1 or 2 that are ready, and two or three that are still in that guilt and shame, and this is my son, I must have had something to do with it, and they're just locked and stuck and cannot move because they're locked in guilt. And so we usually have to intervene on them and free them from that in order for them to be able to take the steps to actually help their loved one. So, and really what they're doing is they're just kind of being dishonest to themselves and minimizing it so that they don't have to face the reality that their loved one is unwell and take the blame off of themselves. They're blaming themselves for the situation, which is very common with spouses, with parents. They feel like they created it, they caused it, and somehow they don't deserve me pushing them because I put them in this situation. So it's a very, dysfunctional, delusional way that families will often look at it. So I have to kind of unravel that and work through that process, a series of questions to kind of get them out of that thinking.
And Drew, that's actually a good segue here because you run this organization. You've been doing it for a long time. You've worked with a lot of families. For those where this is the first time they're hearing about treatment, and we hear it all the time, right? People are like, well, wait a minute, I got to go somewhere. I got to talk to someone about things. I mean, paint a picture of what that would look like if they were walking into spaces like this to get that kind of help.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around addiction my entire life. Just to give you a little bit further personal disclosure, I was born into a family with an alcoholic mother that was very unwell, and I grew up, watching her wreak havoc on our family. When I was 18, I left home, very traumatized by it, and I was in a setting with peers with a lot of substance use and abuse, and it was only a matter of time before I really dove in and became addicted myself. And then I got treated for my substance use. It took about a year. And then I went into this line of work and I trained and I studied and I spent 4 years in graduate school. And, for the last, 14, 13 years, been really helping advise families and individuals. So I've been around this my entire life. At the age of 45, usually my intuition will tell me within seconds what I'm dealing with, the same way an architect would look at a building and say, we don't have a beam there, there needs to be, or anyone of their trade, right? I just happen to be, a specialist in addiction because it's what I've been exposed to my entire life. I didn't choose that. God chose that for me. And so here I am. And the work we do is really welcoming each family when they contact us, phone or in person, and we meet them where they are. Whether they've been through this 100 times and they're 20 years into a cycle with their loved one and they're just about done, or it's their first time they're calling someone about their 14-year-old son. It doesn't matter. Every family is at a different part of this process. And for me, I can meet them wherever they are. And from experience and training and education, I usually know what type of kind of quote intervention is needed based on where the family sits on that, pendulum. I can just usually tell, we call it our clinical intuition or our natural intuition. You can just say, okay, they're very new to this. They don't realize the severity of their 14, 15-year-old missing school, smoking pot every day. They think it's just a phase. And sure, there are one-offs, but there are certainly red flags, failing school, not going to school, smoking pot. It's like that morphs into now they're drinking, and so it's a progressive condition. All the data suggests early intervention and prevention and education, just like the work you guys are doing here, is what halts addiction from escalating. And so it used to be the concept that everybody has kind of bought into over the last 100 years is that no, that doesn't work. The person using needs to decide when it's time for them to get help. That's not actually what our research and data says. It says the complete opposite. But people like to say that because then it's not my problem. Because then they have to hit bottom and they have to come to their realization that they have to get help. And sadly, it's usually too late. There's substantial damage physically and mentally, emotionally, unrepairable harm, trauma that destroys their life. And so, yeah, maybe they're ready at 50, but what kind of life are they going to have now? It's going to be a hard one. I was fortunate when I was 27, my family stepped in and just said, we're not going to watch you destroy your life. And they were very persistent. And I am so grateful they were, because there's no way I would have put myself here. So it was a very long answer to your question about what do you tell families entering this. And for us, we always deliver a message of hope. This is a very treatable condition, very, very treatable. Substance use disorder is so much easier to treat than many, many conditions. The problem is most people don't get treatment because their illness prevents them from getting treatment. But once they are in and they're invested, outcomes are extremely high.
And Drew, there's lots of things that I'm taking from your response. One is the value of having an expert to reach out to. But the other thing that I'm also seeing is that oftentimes when we talk about experts and reaching out to people, we may think of, well, this person is going to give us a script or they're going to tell us all these things, but we forget that behind all of that, there's a human who has their own personal stories. And in your experience working with all the professionals you work with, how many of them have had their own personal journey or their own story that they're connecting with?
Other professionals in my, I mean, most all do to some degree. It's not always related to addiction. Family members or children of parents with substance use or mental illness. I think that's what you're trying to ask me is how many people kind of identify as being in recovery. Yeah, I mean, it's about 50-50. 50% identify as being in recovery. The other 50 maybe somehow impacted by it, which is nice. It brings their personal story, but it can also create challenges because they believe there's a specific way, and it creates a lot of, what we call transference, where people's own experience really interferes their ability to treat people. So it can be an amazing asset, and it can also be a huge risk and liability at the same time if not managed correctly. And sadly, we see a lot of that in our industry. So reaching out to a professional is great, but you got to reach out to the right professional. I think we were talking about this earlier. What's the first thing a family or an individual does when they realize we have a problem here with addiction? They call a therapist, right? They go meet with a therapist. It's a great first thought. The challenge with it is most therapists are not duly licensed as addiction therapists and mental health therapists. Most are just mental health therapists. And so although a great idea and well-intended, it oftentimes doesn't correlate to them getting the right kind of care they need.
Is this like a lot like reaching out to a doctor who's a specialist in a certain area?
Correct. It'd be exactly just the same as, I'm going to go to my primary for, a major gastrointestinal issue and they're going to treat it. Well, they're not. They're going to treat other issues. They're not going to have the knowledge and familiarity with your gastrointestinal tract. So it's very much you need a specialist in addiction to advise on addiction. And if you don't have that specialty, there's risk of greater harm.
So if I'm someone who's watching online or here in person and I start asking the question, okay, maybe I am ready now. Maybe I do want my family or for myself to learn more about how I help my loved one or how I even change some of those patterns that are mirrored. What am I looking for that would tell me that's the specialist I need to find?
There are certain credentials that signify addiction. And so you want to really look in their bio or the credentials after their name that would suggest they have a license in addiction. So I have a license. I'm licensed as an alcohol and drug counselor. Some states have KDAC as a certificate. You want to read the bio to make sure that they have enough familiarity and awareness. But really, first of all, I would hope people would contact. We're a consulting firm that all we do is focus on it. And I think jumping into therapy as a first step to tackling addiction is probably not appropriate anyway. You want to jump into something more solution focused. because people in active addiction and families who are actively part of the addiction aren't going to benefit really from psychotherapy. They're going to benefit more from consulting and coaching to help unravel and get everybody into the right place where then they can receive therapy. But as an entry point, psychotherapy is pretty ineffective for a family that's in active addiction.
Yeah, and sometimes you have this challenge of if you want to bring the whole family in, some people are not going to want to be participants in that. So what is realistic to expect if I've got a family member who says, I've had it, I don't know where to go, but I hear this message of hope. I hear that I'm the one who needs to go in, and if I can make some change for myself, we'll get some momentum going. What is the first step for them?
Right, so I'm a family member, and my mother's an alcoholic, and I am so tired of trying to get her help and intervene on her in my own ways that clearly aren't working, right? I mean, how many families say that? Every family. So like, anything, you would turn to a professional. You'd really want to look outside and look to a professional that has specialization in addiction that can really guide them. And that's the first step where we can assess that family member, decide what level they're at in the process, where's the family at, and then we can determine what type of way we insert ourselves into the equation. If the family member who's using has not crossed into a highly acute stage of addiction, there are more collaborative, less aggressive interventions that we do that are very effective, where we talk to the family, they introduce me to their loved one that's using, and I'll build a rapport with them and understand a little bit about what's going on. It's much more collaborative because they're a bit more stable, and that's very effective. If they're unwilling to do that, there's some things a family can say to them or do to help them become more willing to engage me. If the person is more acute and they're not able to do a lot of those things, we have to look at a more kind of aggressive type of style intervention because we don't really have a choice. Nothing else, it's not going to work. And so the risk of not consulting with somebody the way I just explained it is that you're going to get stuck in a phase that's ineffective and really going to create more problems, and then families get exhausted and say nothing works.
So Drew, if you were, if that person is saying, I'm calling, I'm trying to reach out, I'm going to try to get that coach, I'm not ready for the mental health, I'm not sure if my family wants to do this, but in the meantime, if you were to recommend 3 steps that they could do today, right now, while they're getting ready to get set up with other services, what would you have them do to change things with their family member?
So they're home, and just a couple of things that they should do.
Yeah.
It's so funny. One of the first things I tell families, and a lot of this is common sense, when I give them permission to do that, they're like, "Oh my God, that was so great." The first one is let them be. Just give them space. Let them be. Oh gosh, it's so easy. It's like, yeah, because they're in supervisory roles where they're trying to guard and protect, and as soon as I give them permission to kind of back off, it's like, oh, I can relax a little. Yeah, because you doing that isn't helping. You think you're protecting them, but you're not. The addiction's deep inside them. It's not. And so first and foremost, take a step back, take a breath. I get calls from families all the time. We're scheduled to go on a vacation, but, our loved one is using. We're thinking of canceling the vacation. Absolutely not. You should not cancel that vacation. You're going to not go on vacation to do what? You're not helping as it is. What makes you think staying home is going to do anything except making you feel more resentful and frustrated that you're not on vacation, instead you're home attempting to babysit your favorite alcoholic. It's just not working. So stop working so hard. Take a step back. Reevaluate the situation. Go for a walk. Talk to other loved ones. Think about strategy. Think about a neutral third party that might be able to guide your family. I know you asked for 3 steps, and I'm kind of...
Oh, I'll take as many.
Yeah.
So.
You got to untangle yourself from the chaos. The dysfunction is real in an addicted family, and I get on the phone calls, and it's just like it takes a lot to manage and to get everybody to kind of out. Everyone's in their roles that they've created as a mechanism for survival, right? So we've all fallen into these roles, and so we got detached sister. We got aggressive brother. We got numb dad. We got tearful mom. The whole system is dysfunctional and nobody knows what to do. And so without me coming in and saying, hey guys, we're going to get unified. We're going to create a united front. I'm going to educate them. I'm going to explain where they're at in this cycle. And we're going to put together a real plan that I'm going to facilitate because I'm not emotional. I sleep great at night. I'm not worried about your loved one because they're not my loved one, and I say that not because I don't have feelings, but I say that because that's my job. And I'm able to separate my job, from my life. And if you can't do that, you're not doing your job. You're becoming enmeshed with the family. That's dangerous. Then you lose your objectivity, and you need to maintain that.
And Drew, that's a good point. The whole, this is a job, I sleep well at night because the parent wants to sleep well at night too. They'd like to have that. They'd like to have that peace, and yet they feel like it's their job. You mentioned the tearful mom, a tearful mom that would say, well, my whole life I'm always going to be mom. And if I don't do this, what if my son doesn't come back? What if something happens? And how do you address that when they feel like it is their duty and they're burning themselves out in that duty?
I think they're confused on their duty. That's what I think. It is their responsibility to love and care and take It is their responsibility to love and care and take a bullet for their loved one. It's not their duty to lie in bed with them every night and make sure they're breathing. That's not helping, right? So it's confusing because your DNA tells you one thing and the professional is telling you another thing. So it's one of these very odd situations, especially for mothers, especially for fathers, who get very confused in the counsel because it's contradictory to how they feel. It's like, no, my job is to love and guard him and protect him. But the amount of people I know who have died in their bedrooms with their families in the other rooms, I can't count. So that doesn't mean home is you're protecting them. You're not protecting them. There's no protection. There's no safety. No one can do anything to cure that addiction, the way they think they can. The person needs professional care by a neutral third party.
So if the person needs the professional care, the family member needs the support too, as well for themselves. And so what about community?
Community plays a huge role. Think about it like this. We open talking about the symptoms. The symptoms are the same. The recovery is also the same. That's the funny thing. Community, right, is the opposite of isolation. Addiction equals isolation. Community equals recovery, right? And so we preach the same things to families as we do the person who's using for their recovery. So community is where you free yourself from guilt and shame and isolation, and you're not stuck in a negative mind frame by yourself, right? You come here and you get hope. It's like the amount of success I've seen over the years is way more than the failures. And so, but it's so hard to come to a community when you're struggling, especially when you're filled with guilt and shame and sadness and like, I've done something wrong. I know because I've been there before, and I remember being a kid, I felt that way. I didn't tell any of my friends what I was going through. And I did that because I was ashamed and embarrassed, thinking they would judge me. And all it did was make me hurt more. And so in recovery, it's about transparency, it's about honesty, it's about showing up. And addiction is about isolating, dishonesty, being alone. And so anytime, you're thinking about recovery, it's the opposite of addiction, and vice versa.
Drew, we're going to open this up in a few minutes here for Q&A from the crowd and also people online. But I want to hone in on that last point about a community and finding a space and being open and being transparent. If you're the person who is the helper and you're the person who's always focused on this person, you want to help, you want to heal, but there's a message that a lot of families come with and say, the reason why I don't reach out is because I don't want to burden someone. I feel like I'm just going to come in and bring this depressing story, and I don't want to put that on someone else. Is that fair? Are they being fair to themselves? Are we off on that?
I mean, look, there's truth in it. I've said the same thing. There is truth in it. You don't want to burden others with your sorrows and pain, but the community thrives on helping that. So it is selfless to come because the community needs to gather and to help and to provide hope. And the reality is the cycle works that way, right? And so it is very hard to come out of that dark place and into the community and into the light and say, I don't want to be a burden, but I'm scared, I'm hopeless, I'm all these things, because you don't want to, burden others, right? But the reality is this isn't a place where you're going to come and only talk about the wins in life.
Mm.
You have to be willing to share the not even losses, where the struggles, the hard ones. It's like, I'm really down, I'm really struggling. Like, I don't know what to do. I am at a loss, and I am just here for love and support. Because the thing is we don't need to take any more from anybody else. You don't need to have the solution for me. I just need someone who's not judgmental and has some empathy. The greatest challenge we face with this illness is judgment, right? Is we're prejudged. Still, if I want to open a treatment center, we're going to get a ton of pushback from the city and the neighbors and the community because they don't want those people in their neighborhood or so you'll get this, and they're open about it. It's not like it's quiet. I mean, I've been to these meetings. So the best thing you as a friend or a community member can do for a friend or community member that is struggling is to welcome them without judgment and to give them empathy, because with addiction, we are so judged. We feel so low and so judged. And if you can take that out of it, you will get somebody who kind of blossoms.
We have a statistic that we have that leads on our website, and it talks about how 1 in 4 families are touched by addiction. And, anytime we talk about that stat, most people will say, and we think that that's underreported.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a lot higher. So for that one person that feels like I'm the only one going through it, but there's so many people that are going through this, what's your advice for programs like ours, where we're aiming to provide a space where we can share information that we didn't know? Education, you brought up a lot of key points. You talked about the difference between counseling and coaching. You also helped break us down in terms of how family members need their own support, and we change the way we interact, and that's something that's meaningful, leaves an impact. You've given us resources of what to do in certain situations that are practical for us to put in place to disengage from those patterns. But for the community part, what advice do you give to us for, because here we are, we're at Cornerstone ATX here in Lakeway, and we're trying to engage with the community, but what can we do in this room physically to make sure that we connect with the community out there?
With the community that's struggling, or just the community in general?
Family members that are struggling, the 1 in 4 that's out there that knows that, and maybe the 3 out of 4 that aren't willing to admit it or don't see it just yet right now. We're too afraid to come forward.
Yeah, so first off, you're doing a great job at it. You're already doing a great job at it. For those who are not ready to come forward, there should be a way to chat or submit or ask questions anonymously. So I can anonymously engage where you don't know it's Drew Horowitz, and I can feel comfortable. One of the reasons why, and I've talked to many people why they love ChatGPT and AI is because they can talk to it and they don't feel judged. It's actually kind of an interesting concept. Many people do their own therapy through that. And so I think if there's an anonymous portal or a way for people to communicate anonymously, you take the judgment and shame away from it. And then they'll slowly become more comfortable once they realize it's safe. I think continuing to spread this message that addiction is a disease, it's an illness, right? Did I decide to drink and put drugs in my body? I did. Did I think it would morph into a full-fledged addiction and almost kill me? No. Had I known, I would not have done it. That's not what I thought when I first drank. So there's confusion in the world around addiction. Why are we feeling bad for someone? They're deciding or they chose to do this. No, that's not exactly right. they made the initial decision. But what happened is their brain went through an organic change, a real change, where they lost the ability to control their use. They no longer have the mental capacity to turn it on and turn it off. It does it on its own. And so we need to educate, continuing to do this, the speaker series, having a hotline or an anonymous place to chat, anything like that is just going to help.
Right. We're going to open up for Q&A. So we're going to have a microphone that's going to be moving around. And if you have a question, both online, feel free to submit, and also in person, raise your hand. We'll have that microphone going around. But as the microphone makes the rounds and we start taking some hands there for questions, I just wanted to ask you one last thing. You mentioned that there's more stories of hope, of success, than those of failure. And for many families that are feeling like I'm failing, I'm not connecting, what's one of your favorite stories of hope that you've seen?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I've helped families for many, many years. And I've seen just about every single case you can imagine. And, one thing I'll just say high level first is when our agency takes on a client, we're seeing a 92%, about a 91, 92% response of people getting help. That's the family and the individual actually getting help, starting the recovery process. It's a process. It's not a singular event. It's a process, right? So we gauge our outcome on they're entering treatment, they're starting recovery. Our team is typically a conduit from the community to starting recovery. That's where we've really specialized. Sorry, I forgot the question.
Your message of hope, your favorite story, success story. Yeah.
There have been so many stories over the years, especially in Texas. I've been to Texas a lot for helping people, and I travel the country. I travel internationally as well, helping people overseas in other countries, and I'm so blessed to have had these amazing experiences. There was an individual. The most amazing success story I've ever heard was this guy I worked with for 6 years on and off. He was a lawyer in downtown Manhattan. He was a general counsel at a very large law firm, top of his class of law school, one of the most reputable law schools in the country. He developed some type of psychotic disorder tied to substances, potentially cocaine and methamphetamine. Lost his family, lost all his money, went to Vegas to gamble, and he was living in Las Vegas, homeless, stealing and gambling. His family deployed me to Vegas to locate him, and we kind of had a sense of where he was, and I met him on the street of Vegas, and I still vividly remember what he looked like, which was a pretty scary sight. Since we don't have a lot of time, I'll fast forward, but this individual had a criminal sheet, excessively long. He had all sorts of physical ailments, illnesses, mental health. But over the next 4 years of in and out of treatment, he finally was able to establish recovery, long-term recovery, and got his way back into passing the bar. He lives in Florida. He practices now defending alcoholics and addicts in the state of Florida. And I still see him. His name's Jim. He's an unbelievable guy. He still struggles with some mental health stuff, but he's a practicing functional attorney in the state of Florida. And when I met him, he was 100 pounds, dying, literally. We got him to the hospital. He was like 3 days away from death. And you wouldn't recognize him today. If Jim can do it, anyone can do it. And his parents, for sure, had given up. They're like, we're sending you out. This is it. We're done after this. And I was like, we're going to fight. We're going to fight this disease the best we ever have. We're going to go the distance. And Jim was up. Jim ultimately was up for it. It took a little while, but he ultimately got enough momentum. So recovery is possible. Hope. You should always have hope. This is a very treatable illness. Don't lose hope in the fact that your loved one's not ready for it. It's a treatable condition. We just have to be strategic about getting them from point A to point B.
Perfect. Well, with that, we're going to open up for questions. Again, this is a space where it's open. You'll notice that the cameras are pointing to us here. So yes, we just ask that if you share a question here, we'll direct it to Drew and follow through with that. So, all right. And we got the microphone. Just raise your hand, and we'll hand that microphone over.
Thanks, Drew. You mentioned community resources for the loved ones. Can you follow up on that, what that kind of looks like, what you've seen to be the best resources out there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is Al-Anon, or Alateen is one of the most common free support groups that exist. It's the sister of Alcoholics Anonymous, where people with the addiction go to Alcoholics Anonymous, family members go to Al-Anon, Alateen. So that's the most widely used free support group anywhere in the country. So I think that's great. If you dive in a little bit more to each community, you'll find this. So every community around the country, and I've been to all 50 states multiple times helping people, has their own, they become more aware of this. There's, mom groups, with sons, with addiction. There's all sorts of different things. I think it's a broad question, but what I would say is if you can find a community person or a specialist, they're actually going to be able to guide you a bit more towards that. But yeah, I think, church is obviously, faith-based systems that exist that you belong to. People belong to other types of organizations. I think, like you said, 1 in 4 families are dealing with addiction. I would say 2 out of 4 are in some capacity. It's like you mention it, people are going to come up to you and say, hey, I'm kind of dealing with that as well. And now you have this peer-to-peer support, which is the most profound level of support you can get.
Thank you. Other question? We've got the microphone going around.
Hi there. I have a question. I know that we're all on different parts of that journey, and I'm at that point where I'm like, I had to cut ties. And I'm in a new space, but you did mention that there was some treatment that you as the family member should go through. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because, like I said, we're all at different points, and that ship has sailed, but I'm still changed.
Yeah, so you've obviously been in a relationship with someone that's had an addiction.
Yes.
It's run its course.
Yes.
You've stepped away to take care of yourself.
And my child,
And
yes.
your child, which is smart. That's called a boundary, and those are very important. And you've set a boundary, and sometimes what we'll see is the person will respond to the boundary in a way that ultimately leads them to get help. And if it does, we pray and hope that happens. If not, it now becomes about you and your child getting well, getting support, getting counseling, becoming okay whether that person is or is not okay, right? And so the place where the family, we as specialists who treat addiction with families, and I don't really say this often to families because it's scary and it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you can get to a place where you are completely okay with them being not okay, you've achieved like 5 stars of where you want to be. Like that's and no one can get there. No one can get there because it's impossible because you love them. So how can you be okay with them not being okay? It's very hard, but that's what you're working towards. It's this goal that you're not going to hit. But I think for you is processing through your experiences and trauma, kind of getting to a place where you're free from that. Because here's the thing, if you don't, those will not leave you. Those don't just go away with time. Your scars are still open. If you don't heal them properly, they will bleed. So my advice to family members who have said, what, we're done, we're out of here, I understand that's got to happen sometimes, is that you really invest in your wellness emotionally to make sure that you're well and you're healthy. It's hard, but it will come back to haunt you if you don't.
Good question. A question back here.
So, Drew, first of all, thanks for being here and sharing and giving us this information. I'm going to try to ask this question. It's a big one for me. So personal experience, spouse. I'm a pretty reasonable guy, pretty calm, patience of Job, and this went on many, many years. And I would like to hear your opinion of when that person is using, obviously they get to a state of mind that they clearly have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
But somewhere in that process, when you talk about they're ill, the family's ill, well, we were. I became ill,
Yep.
right? And my daughter, my teenage daughter. And it's felt like I would, in conversations and moments before that person, she got way up here, but somewhere down in here, I was being just sucked into this hole of garbage and conversation and things. You know where I'm going?
I do.
My question is this. Talk a minute about, does the addicted person realize any time in that moment what they're doing? Because a devious person that wants to do something to someone can manipulate and do things and hurt someone, and that's their intentions. I don't know that that's true in this case. Do they know the difference at any point in that curve when the addiction is getting out of control? Is that making sense?
It's a good question, and to let the alcoholic off the hook a little bit, their brain is completely hijacked. Their brain is completely hijacked. Their ability to reason and make wise decisions and have empathy and love for others is completely skewed. So the reality is they're creating chaos and havoc as survival method and symptom of their illness. So not all alcoholics are devious and want, people to feel harm. What they're having is a reaction to how they're feeling inside, which is empty, scared, shameful, mortified. My life isn't working out. And the substances in and of themselves make you crazy. Because if you think about alcohol and you think about drugs, and you think about what happens to a normal person who has a drink or two or three, you get a little loose. You might not even sleep well that night, right? I've heard people say, have a glass of wine, I just don't sleep well. Well, imagine having 10 glasses of wine every night for a year and not sleeping well. And imagine how your appetite is probably going to be impacted the next day. You're either going to not eat as great or you're not going to eat, right? And then think about your mental acuity. It's going to be off, right, because of all those things. This is a snowball effect. So in addition to the symptoms of addiction, you have a person who's physically and mentally deteriorating. And so what happens is it all comes together in a storm, and it creates havoc, just like you're talking about. And they just keep going until something stops them in their tracks. And so the best way to kind of see this is if you've ever seen the person not in active addiction and active addiction, they're two different people. And we all know that person. It's like, I have friends that have gone in and out. It's like night and day. It's like, it's clearly not who they are in that moment, right? And so I believe, who you were dealing with, and you probably know much better than me, those were behaviors and symptoms highly tied to their addiction. Then we throw in some personal characteristics on top that kind of amplify everything. Like they might be naturally, arrogant just by their their personality type, or they're naturally stubborn. And then you just mix it all in, right? But I hope I answered your question. It's a hard thing to be part of and watch.
Thank you. We'll leave space for one more question if there's one out there. Going once, going twice.
Let me bolt onto that real quick. Yes, you did. So does that tell me, and what I personally have learned from these sessions that we've had, I've said it numerous times, if I'd have had this information, I would have been a different person the last X years or whatever.
Yep.
And so maybe talk for just a minute what I've learned, and I would like your perspective. How early and how quick does the family member that's being affected draw the boundary? Because I didn't realize that was okay.
Yeah.
And I suffered a consequence, and my daughter did in a big way. And how quick you do that and how you decide to do that. Obviously, you need help along the way,
Right.
But maybe just a few generic comments on that.
Look, I think if you know you're in a relationship or you have a loved one that is using or abusing, maybe they haven't even crossed into full addiction, but you know that there are these nights where it's really bad, it's like you start right away. You know, there's no such thing as starting too early. I go to schools and speak, to kids about addiction. We try to get in front of it. Same thing comes with intervention and boundaries and stepping in. So the biggest mistake is people wait too long, right? Because they minimize the seriousness of it, or they wake up the next day, they're like, I'll deal with this. Maybe today will be different. Again, same symptoms as your spouse. So there's no it's never too late. Remember the guy Jim, basically 3 days away from death. Or you could take the kid I helped last week who was 14. He was smoking marijuana and he was being oppositional and defiant. And he's getting great help right now. And so there's this huge spectrum of people on this curve of substance use disorder. And what I tell families is they'll ask me, they're like, when do we know if we should do an intervention? I said, if they're using and unwilling to get help, there should be some type of intervention. Okay. It's very simple. They're using and unwilling to get help. That doesn't mean you have to live and tolerate it because they're unwilling to get help. That's what a lot of families think. They're not ready, so I guess this is where we're at. It's like, that's not a solution. That is pretty much ignoring the problem. And that's what we have been told for many, many years. And it's completely false, and it has killed millions of people.
And Drew, I just want to thank you because you gave us a lot in terms of education. I mean, even just with answering this question here about talking about intervening and acting and seeing that there's a problem and acting on that, not to be passive, and at the same time, too, just different ways of making change happen, which might even be just the family member getting that support. So for those online or those in person who want to hear more from you, where would they go?
Yeah, reach out. I love what I do. I get to do this job, that God designed for me. And so Drew Horowitz and DrewHorowitzAssociates.com, Drew at DrewHorowitzAssociates.com, text, call, whatever you feel safe doing, submit an online inquiry. Yeah, go ahead.
We have an online question.
Oh,
great.
It said that you mentioned looking for the right professional. How do you find them?
So I think, a couple different ways. Number one is a lot of people call it treatment center. And so sometimes a good high quality treatment center can direct you. Two is looking for certain credentials that's specific to addiction. So if you're looking for a professional, make sure they have credentials specific to addiction, not just mental health. Those are two options. So you can go online and look for addiction consultant, specialist, and hopefully it can have that. But you're welcome to contact me, and I can, if I'm not the person, I will connect you with the right person, because it's possible I'm not the right person. And I wanted to add one more thing. I've been contacted by some families, a lot of families over the years, that actually don't need intervention. They're inquiring early, which is great, and I endorse it, but their loved one doesn't need treatment. Because I talked to their loved one, and I assess the situation objectively, and their loved one needs something, but it's not treatment. And so, but that's peace of mind for the family. The mom was like, I can't believe you're telling us we don't need to do anything. I'm like, look, I spent 5 hours. I know when I know, and here's what I believe we need to do. And they were like almost mad at me. This was a couple weeks ago, that I didn't want to, come in and put their son in treatment, but I'm like, he doesn't need it. So I will be honest and tell people what they need and don't need. And that's super important because families are vulnerable and they're scared.
It's good to help. And we're going to post that website on our website there so that people know where to go to if they want more resources. And again, for those online or here in person, just to remind you that we have these weekly speakers. There is now a growing library on our website of amazing speakers that we have had on this stage here since last March when we first launched this. So if you're curious and you want to learn more, you want to spend more time with more experts, we are online. It is carescommunity.us. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course the YouTube channel where we have all of these here. So I want to thank you, Drew, for coming out here. And for those in person, let's give them an applause.
Thank you.
And Drew, you gave me permission to share this. So we're going to put this
I don't remember
here.
what he said, what I said.
We're going to put this online as
Okay,
part
what's
of the video.
that?
So if you made it this far into the video, watching later on, or watching live right now, or in person and still here, I want you to know that Drew had an emergency root canal at 6 a.m. this morning
Yes, I did.
and still managed to make it here tonight to share. So Drew, an extra thank you
Yeah, you're very welcome.
being here.
Yeah, no, this is my passion. This is my work, and it means a lot to me to come here and share my time. And, you know, I don't know everything, but I know what I've seen and I know what I've been through. And if I can share that and somebody gets help from this, like, mission complete. So I wouldn't miss it.
Thank
know?
you.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, reminder then that next Monday we will be here in the same space at the same time. So if you've benefited from this and you're in the Lakeway area, think of Cornerstone Church ATX, and you'll find us here, where we'll be here next week. Will Croswell will be presenting. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a great friend to the
Good
recovery
man.
community.
Good
you know
guy.
him well as
Yes,
well.
I do.
So it's there we go. We've got a recommendation
Yep.
here. So please join us because Will is a great person. He's going to be speaking on the topic titled Loving Well in Recovery, Boundaries, Support, and Family Healing. So please bring out someone that you think could benefit from this, share with them, even forward this message today just to let them know this is the kind of education, resource, and community that we're building here in this spot. And as we wrap up, the final thing that I always say whenever for anyone who's new to this space, online or in person, one simple message to you. Welcome home. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next Monday at 7.